morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Reimagining in 2021 webinar. We're just going to wait a few moments while people join us. And while you do come in to the Zoom room, we'd love you to open your chat function, toggle it to all attendees, and let us know where you're joining us from today. For those of you who joined us last year, you can see we've had a background change here. We've got I go like that, we've got a bit of a view. We're finally back in our office, having held all our webinars from home last year. So for some of you, you joined us last year, and it's great to have you back. And for those joining us for the first time, welcome. After the success of our Adapting in 2020 webinar series, we're thrilled to launch Reimagining in 2021. And this is the first of many sessions and panel discussions we will have throughout the year. And it's fantastic to have you join us here for the first one. So as I said, let us know where you're joining us from today, and we'd love you to join in the chat as we go through. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Georgie. I'm the Chief Engagement Officer at Fetching Events and Communications, and I'll be your MC today. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we're all coming together from this morning, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This session is being recorded and you will be sent a link following it so you can watch it again, or if there's anything you missed out on, you can catch up. Megan, welcome Megan, great to have you here from Melbourne. So 2021, it's almost 12 years exactly since our world was completely turned upside down, and we'll hear from one of our panelists who had their event shut down mid-festival, which I think is the nightmare that we all want to avoid. But events are back running now. We know that events will run, hopefully, but it's just a matter of what they'll look like and how they'll run. We know the power of live events. In fact, Tourism New Zealand did some research last year asking people how much they valued or what value they placed on face-to-face events. And over half of their respondents said that they valued face-to-face events more now than they did pre-COVID. So we certainly know the power that these events have. But what's it like running an event in this new world? What does it hold for us as event managers? How can we learn and collaborate for a stronger industry? What can we learn and improve on from each event that we run? Because each event will be different depending on at what stage we are coming out of restrictions or potentially going back into some restrictions. And I'm thrilled to welcome our panel of event directors from all corners of the events industry today. We've got Troy and Jen Best, event directors from Equestrian and Community Sport Events. Welcome.
Hi.
We've got Johanna Durand, General Manager, Alliance Francais Melbourne and the Alliance Francais French Film Festival. Welcome. Ah, I love it. A good excellent. And we'll actually be putting a link in the chat function towards the end, so you can check out the film Still to Go. And Cynthia Nolan-Myers, Senior Producer at Art Centre Melbourne. Welcome, Cynthia. And I will be flying the flag for the business events sector today. So Troy and Jen, we'll get started with you. You actually kicked back into action in October 2020. So you're regional. You were able to run an event in the regional area while Metro was still shut down, and it was the first of the official event, official type of equestrian event being run. Tell us, what was that like?
It was daunting, Georgie. It was, it was just jumping off into the unknown, I think, for us. I guess we consider ourselves pretty brave, being the first ones to go out there and have a go. And yeah, it was quite daunting, and just a lot of information that we had to take on board and learn and interpret. I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges, was interpreting the information, because as you know, two different people read something and you get a different result. So I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges, but it was exciting too, to be able to kick off and get things going again. That was you know, we were ready for it. It was difficult having to exclude our metro partners being regional Victoria. You know, we had different rules to half of the competitors that would normally come to us. So whilst we were excited, we were also very mindful that we were going to have to exclude, you know, half of our competition base and our friends and our peers. So, yeah, so I guess that was another challenge that we had as well.
Yeah, you sort of, you know, in the old days, you run an event, but now you're not only running a new type of event, you're having to sort of manage expectations, potentially now exclude people that can't come along. Did you find with the riders that they were just, you know, they were ready to get back? They'd been waiting for this to happen. Was there a hesitancy?
The riders were definitely ready. Actually, everybody was ready to get back. We were quite surprised. Probably our judges for our competitors was the biggest surprise, because they are of the much older generation, and I thought, this is where we'll have problems, because will they want to come out so quickly and be so close to people? Obviously, the judges have got cars, and then how are we going to do this? How are we going to go contactless? Our sport has always been very there's a lot of contact with the scoring and stuff like that. We'd never run a dressage competition before, so that in itself was enough to go, why are we actually doing this? But we understand how it works, and then we just had to come up with a lot of good or new concepts so that everyone could feel like we were going as contactless as possible, and we made sure that everyone was happy to do it, because we didn't want someone to go, well, do I really want to do this? Even my own committee is of the older generation, and but we did it ourselves without those guys, just to, well, one, it was probably a bit off the cuff anyway, just to do it. Yeah, it was. I was very surprised that the judges were so keen to get out. The riders are definitely new. Mind you, the dressage riders are mostly of that older generation too, but they would come out in droves. They couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah. So that actually aligns with some research that was coming out of America and the UK last year during COVID, where they were asking about how they felt or how they would feel about coming back to events. And the research was showing is if people had a connection to that event, or if they were regular theatre goers, there was a higher confidence in coming back to the event compared to if they weren't. So that, completely aligns with that. And I know I've talked about this, some of you may have heard this research that McKinsey & Co did last year about in Australia about how people felt coming back to events, and about 30% said they were, as soon as restrictions eased, they were going to go back to events. But about 66% said they'd come back to events when restrictions eased, or one of three things had to happen as well. And that was that they found the medical commentary deemed it safe, that they could see the sanitisation and the distancing was in place. And the other one was that they saw other people going back to events. And I think we sometimes underestimate the power of our events isn't just running it for the people who are coming, but it's showing that we can run, and it's building that confidence for the wider community to come to the next event and just, I guess, gain that momentum.
Well, I think that was one of the reasons, to a point, why we run it, because I'm very much about doing things. I can't stand waiting around for someone else to do it. So we kind of, as soon as we knew the restrictions were lifting and Gen rides dressage, we thought, well, let's go to some competitions. And then we rung around and no one would run one. And I said, well, this is pretty unfair. Everybody's got memberships. Let's just run one ourselves. So we did. And it was, I thought if we run it, then someone else would go, well, this can't be that hard. Well, we were willing to help anyone that wanted to run one. I think the biggest thing was that EV probably wasn't quite ready for it. The COVID rules and restrictions hadn't really been developed. So we were kind of just talking to you and talking to Matthew and going, well, this is what we should do, then we'll do this. So that was probably, I mean, I think when you look now, it's a lot more structured than probably what we had, but we knew if we got going, someone else would get going. And well, sadly they didn't really, but Boneyard I think did. So they started to get going. Yeah.
But I think that was part of what it was too, Georgie. If somebody got going, then everyone was forced to get with it, put those policies in place. Like Troy said, Equestrian Victoria weren't ready for us to get back competing. So I guess us getting going shunted that along and got it going. And from there, the policies were developed, and now, you know, EV's on board and they're following the changes and things are coming through. So I think us getting going was what forced things to happen. So it was a good thing in the end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't know if any of you have read the book Who Moved My Cheese, but I kind of keep saying to people during this is exactly about the book. And for those of you who haven't read it, it's basically about mice that go the same way through the maze each day to get their cheese, and then the cheese gets moved, and it's how the different mice adapt. Sounds like a terrible experiment. It's not. It's a lovely little book. But it just is about some people find other ways to do things, and some people keep just trying to do it the way it used to happen, and when that can't happen. And talking about the restrictions, and you know, I know Equestrian Victoria were constantly getting information, and things were changing because things were coming out from the sport departments, DHHS. That's still happening. We know with the public event framework that keeps changing and changing for the better because things keep easing, but it is a constant change. And we were talking before that for those of you in Victoria, we have the restricted activity directions, the RAD, which basically is the set of rules that comes out under the Chief Health Officer, and we're up to version 10. So it just shows, and I think that's version 10 out of lockdown. So it does keep changing.
Yeah, well, there was no version when we started, so we didn't even have to apply to run it. Like I actually find it harder now because I have to apply to run it than then. It was just, let's just do it. Put all the restrictions we can in place.
It's a new world. So tell us, how did you go about planning the event? Where did you even start? With
we were driving in the car
with some mad thought that I wanted to go competing. Well, Troy gets really involved in reading the rules and knowing things. So I left all of that to him. He read all the policies. He interpreted, you know, what little information we had to go on at that point. And then I went about putting together the competition. But just thinking while we were talking then, Georgie, some of the things, you know, we've talked about the way we've had to change what we do, and the changes that we've had to put in place, and doing things differently. And I think for me, that's one of the most exciting things that's come out of all this negativity around COVID is the way we are doing things now is so much better. We've been forced to make changes that, you know, we weren't comfortable with. There were things available to us in the equestrian events community that, you know, we could have been using for a long time, and we were forced to go. You know, we now have contactless dressage scoring, and, you know, we actually run the horse trials as a completely paperless event, and that's never been done, particularly, I think it's been done once in Australia, but never been done down here in Victoria. So we had to take real leaps of faith with our technology and with how we were running the event. So I guess, you know, coming in and doing that first event, there was so much learning and so many, we had to really appeal to our volunteers and our organisers and our officials that it's going to be different. You're going to have to open your mind and go with us on this. And everybody did. You know, I think that was probably one of the most impressive things about our first event was the competitors wanted it to go ahead, so they complied to everything we asked. The officials really wanted it to go ahead, so they complied with everything that we needed. And we just had to think outside the box and make things happen.
And you've been terrific with your communication. I've seen the level of communication and even the tone of voice that you've sent out to your competitors, and you've really created that safe environment for them. You've set that expectation of what to expect when you come, but they also see the positives. As you say, it's creating stronger events. And I know even talking with some community organisations who perhaps weren't very tech savvy, and other, you know, peak bodies have tried to pull them into the future a bit and, you know, get online, and they said, no, we can't. COVID hit and they had to, and they've never looked back. So I think we just didn't have time to say, we can't do this. What if it doesn't happen? We're not ready. We just had to move.
Yep.
And, you know, as you say, that's one of the positives that's come out. What would you say surprised you the most from those first couple of events you ran?
The two very different events at two very different times, because the rules had changed so much between both events. It was
and I should say, we're still talking pre-Christmas, so this is sort of the speed.
Yeah, October and December. So it I think the thing that surprised me the most was how compliant people were, especially in the dressage, because they're an older generation. The eventers, I expect them to try and break as many rules as they can, because they're all young people, and that's pretty much their job, I think. So I think it was just I think it runs pretty easy. Like, I was quite surprised how once you get it all in place, and that's the nightmare, is the lead up, obviously, and most people on when anything, job or volunteer, the lead up is always the hardest part. Once it happens, and it doesn't matter what goes wrong, it tends just to happen either way. But I was very surprised how compliant people are. I mean, we had I don't know, probably 300, 400 people to horse trials, and really only one of them needed speaking to. So people are very, very compliant. I think you just got to trust them. That's we all want. I mean, we are one of them anyway. We are one of the people. So whatever we expect, I would suspect most of them expecting the same. And just giving people. I mean, I found that my committee being a much older committee, I was very surprised that they were keen to run it. I thought they would have said, no, let's just wait another 12 months, let it go, and let somebody else bother this. But they were extremely keen to run it. They're very invested. So, yeah, I was. I think. It's nearly a long time ago, especially October, and so much has changed. It's like a whole different time.
But yeah, I think the compliance was probably the biggest surprise. But like you said earlier, in our communication, we put it to the competitors. This is for you. This is so that let's set the standard so that we can get Metro out, and sort of put the responsibility back on them. And they picked up the mantle and ran with it, which was great.
And I remember, Jen, you saying you've never had the venue left so clean.
I know, it was amazing.
But it's, you know, Troy, you were saying about in the lead up, and you're so right. I was at an event recently where they were doing some training and everyone had questions, but, well, what if someone doesn't wear a mask? And what if someone doesn't do this? What if someone doesn't do that? And someone said, look, I think we're getting ourselves worked up about stuff that actually hasn't happened yet. And, you know, I've seen this event since run, and, you know, most people were compliant, but you sort of, you know, there's other elements of our events that might not happen outside of COVID. But yeah, so it's as you say, trusting, just being ready, and putting everything in place. Now,
Yeah.
get to ask any questions in the chat function as we go along. But thank you, Troy and Jen.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
So we're going to change gears now and head to the movies. The Alliance Francaise French Film Festival, which is currently running, and as I said, we'll post a link. You can check out some of the sessions. I've been to one and I can attest that they are fantastic. It's back in a live format and packed to 75% capacity, we should say. It's a festival that, and Johanna will tell us a bit more about this. You got opening night and a few sessions in this time last year, and then you were shut down. Johanna, welcome. It's great to have you here. Do you want to tell us a bit about what happened last year and then what the festivals looks like this year?
Good morning, Georgie. Good morning, everybody. Well, the Alliance Francaise French Film Festival is in its 32nd edition. It's a nationwide festival that showcases the best and the most recent French movies or French-speaking movies with English subtitles in all the Palace cinemas in Australia. So it is a long-standing event, I would say. Unfortunately, last year we only had the opening in March and a couple of sessions, and then we had to shut down, as you know. There was it was postponed in other states in July, but unfortunately in Victoria we had to completely pass for last year. We just passed. And this year it's a very interesting because it's a completely different event in the sense that, you know, there is some positive things to those events because we have 10 world premieres, which never happened before. So unfortunately, other countries couldn't have those movies, and we're the first ones to get those. So Australians have the privilege to be the first one in the world to see some movies and release them here, which is which also brings some attention for the directors. And you know, they're like, oh, maybe we should come when possible to Australia and investigate. So it brings some light also in Australia. We have 37 movies in the lineup, and 12 of them have already won César, which is like the French Oscar. So it has been very well received by the profession. And this festival, obviously in the run of it, you know, both social distancing, food and drink handling, the mask, all the communication, everything has been very different. But what remained is the pleasure of being together in a safe space and to enjoy the high quality screening. So this was really, really different. And it started very slow. We were so scared with the snap lockdown, and compared to the other states, it was really like people were quite scared, I think, or they lost the habit of going back to the cinemas. But after maybe 10 days, it started to really kick up. And up to now, we had 40,000 viewers in Melbourne. So it's you know, it's quite amazing knowing where we are coming from.
Yes.
We are very chuffed, and the festival continues till the 5th of April. So you still have a bit of time to enjoy.
Fantastic. And just talking about the fact that we've now got some world premiere movies because of what's happening around the world. You just mentioned earlier before we came into the broadcast that even you were seeing in the French press the fact. Do you want to tell us a bit about how Australia is being viewed because we can run events?
Yes, it's interesting the perceptions because between France and Australia. During the lockdown last year, a lot of the French people were surprised how compliant and resilient and respectful Melbournians were. They were like, "It's not possible. Why you're not in the street?" You know, and it's too hard. And now 1 year later, everybody's like, wow, you did the right thing and it's paying off so well. And yeah, they are looking at us like this is the country of culture, and it is the one country where things are happening, and especially in Melbourne. And I think a lot of the eyes, whether from politicians or journalists or citizens, are looking at Australia and like, what are you doing right? You know, and how come you have so many live events, and how do you manage big flux of people, and how do you do the comms? And they are very keen to understand, and there is a will to know more about Australia and Australian culture, and how do you do it. And I think it also brings, we used to have a lot of international events in Australia, and now we are looking to more local and national artists, and people are like, actually they are really, really good. So it's changing a bit the perspective over the industry, and I think it's bringing a lot of good things despite the difficulties.
Yeah. What was the biggest learning in running this year's event, or even planning what a film festival would look like in a COVID-safe world? I think that I might say it all.
Yeah, no, I started, to record because I was chatting with my team and I said, we have to record. This is historical time. And, in a couple of months, we won't remember. And, and there is it has been just a big roller coaster on the emotional side, but it has been also a huge learning curve. So I think, there is a lot in terms of organization, being smarter in the logistics, planning, communications. We also have had to be more creative with the constraints and plan for the unexpected in a way. There is many, many areas, but if I have to say really like the two biggest learning, one is the people. Like more than ever, people are key. People are the heart of the events, and without them, and without the commitment, the involvement, the flexibility, the resilience, there is nothing. So it's really, I think we realized, yes, there is the technology, and it's very useful to process contactless, to plan. It's key, but the people really make the difference, I think, in the events. And the second thing is the carbon print and to be environmental friendly. We had it in mind, and we were a bit shy in the implementation beforehand, and now it became more compulsory. It's a no-brainer. We have to be more careful about our print, and especially in event management. And now that we have more things individually wrapped and everything is like packaged and we customize and do it small, we have to have this concern about the environment and recycling. And yeah, so it's the thinking about it.
Yeah, and that's such an important point. I have always sort of joked, oh, I work in events, I can't ever be paperless. I need my run sheets, I need this and that. Working at home for pretty much all of last year without a printer, and I think I went to Officeworks twice, I managed, and it's like you were saying, it's forced us, and carrying on from what Troy and Jen said, we are reimagining our events, and we're stripping back perhaps sort of that guff that we had around them that was there because it worked and we'd already always done it, and there was no reason at that point in time to change. But this is actually forcing us to relook at it, and with that, it's making really efficient, that's a bit of a cold word, but stronger events and more focused, and it comes back to the purpose of the event and that user, that guest experience or that user experience. And I guess sort of also leading on from that, from an events, business events point of view, pre-COVID, there was a push more for, videoing in guest speakers, not flying out a guest speaker from America to do 1 hour keynote and then flying them back because of the carbon footprint, and actually looking at how online could work a lot more effectively. And of course, it's just sped up that trend as well. Did you, with the festival, you've got your films in person, did you move to any online options as well for this year, or is that something that you'll sort of bring into the festival offering?
The online screening, no, because it's part of our concept. It's really to have a collective experience. So the movies are in the Palace cinemas, and it's very important to us because you don't have the same, sound, image, experience all together. And I think people have been also a bit fed up with, the online binge watching, and we position ourselves in a slightly, different content, I would say. But we do have a different use. I mean, for the communication, we did way less print and way more digital. We rethought all our digital marketing strategy. Also, we used to have a lot of guests coming from France just to give speeches. So we did that recorded, and we screened it either on social media, like we had Isabelle Huppert delivering very sweet message to Australians, and so this was on so we screened it in the cinemas, so that's a bit different. And as you were saying, we are starting to approach things way differently with guests and artists. We used to fly in a lot of people from France or French-speaking countries, and just for a lecture or one event or a couple of events, but it was quite limited. And now we are more planning for residencies and deeper work in collaboration with Australian teams and longer term projects, where actually, they stay in for a couple of weeks or months and have a bit deeper relationship and projects built really in cooperation. And I think that makes much more sense, both nowadays on the environmental side, but also on the creative and collaboration side, just to take the time. I think the relationship to time and space really changed and shaped the way we work.
Absolutely. And that sort of that deeper, I guess, connection, and earlier you were talking about our audience. This is about our audience. And I ran a business breakfast in March, which was that was the last event I ran last year, just before we went into lockdown, to the point where my mum came and worked at the event, like all good mothers do, and was trading toilet paper out the back of her boot, because we were in the toilet. She was on Beaconsfield Parade in St Kilda because we couldn't get toilet paper. And then we ran, it was our first event back this year, and we realised how important, obviously, our guests are the key to the event. They would all be coming at it from a different point of view. Some were, couldn't wait to get back. We had others calling and saying, I'm an asthmatic, what sort of COVID safe practices will you have? We actually built into our venue contract that if we got locked down, we would go to breakfast boxes and we would go online. So when people bought their ticket, it clearly said, if public health orders deem we can't run, we'll revert to a breakfast box and you'll be able to watch it online. And people loved that. I mean, I think people were probably just as happy to get that as coming to the event, because it showed that whatever happens, we'll still run. You won't have to worry about being cancelled and getting your ticket money back, or that it won't run there. It was building that confidence as we went. And then each person, was coming at it from a different point of view. It might have been their 10th event back. It might have been their first. But it was, how would our guests feel? Just simple things like, we didn't have 10 to a banquet table like you usually would. We had 8, which just created a bit of extra space. But what we've since found is that it actually created better conversation, having a smaller amount of people. Sort of 10, you might speak to the person next to you and maybe one across. Having 8, people actually had better conversations. So we won't go back to 10 chairs a table. Doesn't mean we less people in the room, but tiny things we didn't even think of, but we just did as part of the COVID thing, actually created a much better event that we'll return to. Before we finish, are there any parts of the old event? I mean, you've talked about sort of the new stuff. Any parts of the old event that you'll just never return to, apart from printing?
I think the food, drink, handling, just the general hygiene and safety. I think it's important to keep the communication as well. And the mix between, digital, and we want to enhance really the physical experience. And, people have a better appreciation of, being in a venue, and they have higher expectations as well. Yeah. So we really have to make a difference with the on-site live event, whether it's indoors or outdoors. But I think we have, it forces us to bring like the best of ourselves and the best of the events. So I think we try to appreciate and to improve and to deliver and go beyond our customers and stakeholders' expectations.
And it's funny, often when we do event debriefs, it's they're thorough, but it's around, did this work? Did this work? was the AV okay? Did food arrive? Did we just do what we wanted to do? But we often don't get the chance to go even deeper around, okay, but what was the experience? How to do that better? And this has given us an opportunity to really dive into that.
Yeah, and we have been very lucky because this, I think for event manager, this time has been a great opportunity to experiment different things, to run pilots, to take risks, to do things in a different way. And the community and the audience have been very patient and open to new things that we wouldn't have experimented in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm also looking that in the coming months, their expectations and their standards are gonna go higher.
Yeah.
So we also have to deliver, like maybe small mistakes we could do because, of those uncertain times. But in the coming months, the expectations are really rising. And it's like we are 1 year into COVID, and now it's like a no mistake time. So we're gonna be finished with the experimentation and kind of tolerance time, and yeah, we have really to deliver.
Yeah, and it's talking about, there's been a lot of talk about expectations, and because of COVID, we expect to order something online and it gets there quickly. We could access things through Zoom, and we have a much more sort of immediate, I guess, expectation. And so that will come with our user experience and our guests as well, because they've seen what can happen. So why, wouldn't it happen at our event? And I know, last year events cancelled and postponed, and we all accepted that. But this year, we expect events to run, bar obviously a circuit breaker lockdown and a big festival can't run. But if it can evolve and we can find different ways, and that's what will deliver great events. It's tricky as event managers. You're sort of planning 2 events at once. You're planning if the event runs or if there's going to be a change. I think we're up to version 10 of the RAD here in Victoria, so it's constantly changing for the better. Usually, easing the restrictions so we can bring more events elements in, but it is that constant thing as we go on. Well, thank you, Johanna. It's great to hear about that. And as I said, if you've got any questions, just pop them in the chat function. Now to one of the amazing venues that definitely reimagined events and was pretty much the leader. I can remember seeing that first article on, I think, Concrete Playground or Urban List about the fact that the Sydney Maya Music Bowl was going to come back with pods and decks. And it's like, what is this new world? And I can remember actually on Christmas Eve watching the Carols by Candlelight telecast and taking photos every time there was an aerial view, because a friend in London wanted to know what the bowl was looking like and what these pods were. So Cynthia, as we said, the Maya Music Bowl is one of our iconic venues and one of the first to come back with concerts. You introduced pods and decks. You had live and digital offerings as part of the Live at the Bowl program. Tell us all about it.
Thank you, Georgie, very much. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we're all on. I myself am on Wurundjeri country of the Kulin lands, and I hold really deep respect for traditional custodians' long and continuing relationship and connection to land, water and culture. This land is unceded, and the strength and resilience of the First Nation peoples of this country continues. I pay my sincere and deep respect to elders past, present and emerging, including all First Nation individuals in the digital space today. Thank you, Georgie and Fetching Events, for inviting me to take part too, and I hope that my contribution and insights prove valuable. In terms of our Sydney Maya Music Bowl and Live at the Bowl program development and delivery, including the COVID-safe pods and decks that you're talking about, it's important to acknowledge how we got there and where we came from. So I'm going to be covering a little bit about live events, but importantly talk to our ongoing connection with our audiences throughout COVID, because it was this ongoing connection that enabled us to support our funding requests that were essential to deliver our large-scale events at Sydney Maya Music Bowl and also facilitated the attendances. Before COVID, Victoria's creative industries contributed 31 billion to the economy annually, and our industry and sector employs 260,000 people, 8% of the state's workforce and the visitor economy. Pre-COVID contributed around 20 billion to Victoria's gross state product each year. And these numbers can't be ignored. The arts is a massive contributor to the visitor economy, employing well over 250,000 people directly, and not to mention the indirect employment. Arts Centre Melbourne is a significant contributor to this, and our pre-COVID annual snapshot was around 3.5 million visitors to our site, our in-venue live sites, more than 1,600 performances, and over 1,000 artists and creatives employed, and that's including ongoing staff at Arts Centre Melbourne. We welcome more visitors through our doors than the wonderful MCG does annually, and our core purpose of enriching the lives of Victorians through the power of the performing arts has never, ever, ever been more important. In early March, when COVID hit and we closed our doors, we had really limited online digital offers, and pretty much within 10 days of closure, we developed and implemented our online experience offer, which we called Together With You. Within 2 weeks of closure, we launched this digital content hub with the aim to keep audiences connected to Arts Centre Melbourne during closure, because our core purpose remained enriching the lives of Victorians through the power of the performing arts. Our focus areas for the digital offer was connecting audiences, equity and representation, support of the small to medium and independent sector, and forging partnerships with other organisations. Streaming of content has opened up archival footage and presentation of live experiences, including resident company performances, creative developments, behind-the-scenes documentaries, and online exhibitions. Interactive programs have featured facilitated virtual classes with schools, on-demand workshops with schools and with emerging artists, and panel discussions like this. All of this keeping our artists connected to our audiences and keeping people in work. Together With You has been an unreservedly resounding success. On average, we are still reaching 550,000 people per week, and over 200 individual public-facing online experiences have been delivered since March 2020. Remembering that none of this existed this time last year. It's pretty wild and fantastic.
It is, and it's I know last year every year I say I'm going to go to the Writers' Festival, and I never life gets in the way. Last year I went to all the I didn't go to all the online sessions. What am I saying? I went to about 3 of the online sessions, but it's like, oh, okay, next year I'm going to go when it's back live. Being able to do it online, it kept that connection. The same with the Melbourne Film Festival. They had the luxury, unlike the French Film Festival, to have that lead time, knowing they'd have to fully go online. So it's amazing how the digital can really tie in with the live events, and not only bring in a new audience, build a connection, but create other opportunities. And I know with some of the live business events we've been running, we've sold out, which is fantastic. So we just create a Zoom to the room ticket. People can just join. So, it's bringing those two together strengthens both types of events.
Exactly.
Yeah, the pods and the decks. So for those of you not in Melbourne or who haven't seen, the My Music Bowl brass has been completely reimagined with decks with, I think, is it 6 or 4 chairs?
It's a mix. We've got pods and decks. Yeah.
So where did that idea come from?
Well, there was a lot of research undertaken across the sector in Australia, but also internationally. But the pods and decks are just one element, because we've also got, including enforcement of restrictions, physical distancing. We've gone to cashless services. We've got the separated seating, which is the pods and desks, and we've got mask wearing as required, and sanitising stations, and additional staffing to monitor audience activity and ensure COVID safety officers. And all of this is surrounded by really clear communication and systems and processes when you buy your ticket, when you're looking to buy a ticket, when you buy your ticket or reserve your event seat if it's a free event, and also as you're entering into the building, and then the venue, and as you're exiting. So it's all combined. And I would like to say that just really recently, because of the ever evolving restrictions that we live within now, we've actually got general admission possible too. So that's now finally opened up. So we're not just around the pods and decks.
Yeah.
which is really exciting, because if you wanted to buy a ticket, you did have to make sure that you had a group of people with you.
Yes, but even that has created new things. And I, for those of you who follow Rusciano, I've seen she did a concert at the Bowl recently, and there was obviously people wanting to attend who couldn't get a group together to get a deck or a pod. So a Facebook group was started. So you could go and say, I'm keen to go. And suddenly groups of people who didn't know each other were coming together to go to a concert together, which, you know, is just another new thing that comes out, or that has been sped up by COVID. Cynthia, what were some of the challenges when you were starting to plan? But at the same time, what were the positives that you've seen come out of this?
Certainly a lot of our challenges have been in our rights, in terms of copyright licenses, when we're looking to have digital as well as our live, because I can't stress enough the importance of the digital component, whether that be a live streaming or a delayed stream, or an ancillary kind of digital content that is offered for audiences, whether they're going to the wonderful live event or whether for geographical or other reasons that prevent them from wanting to or being able to attend the live event, being able to access the, you know, theatrical and creative content in that way. So rights is a really big thing, and it's been a really wonderful and sometimes hair-tearing out adventure that we've all been on. And also the types of broadcast allowances, etc. The lengthy contract negotiations when we add digital components to live events, but also when we add cancellation clauses and things like that, both in the ticketing and in payment of artists, etc. Our resources, our budget, the sudden tightening of restrictions and relaxing of restrictions, and I guess the different ways of working, which is also one of the positives. We have embraced different ways of working. I started at the Arts Centre relatively recently before COVID, so it's been a really wild journey of, you know, corporate knowledge, learning and developing kind of, you know, contacts and networks internally. But we certainly work really collaboratively across departments, which has been incredibly beneficial. We've got cross teams working on one team approach outcomes for events, and we've ensured that both internally and externally, all of our communication has been really clear, so that everybody has understandings around expectations and the risks associated with particular events, because as we've all recognised, you have to have multiple different events all planned as potential outcomes as, you know, the one event that you're going to be delivering. It's pretty wild. Allow time to work through complexity and allow grace and empathy as people individually work through that complexity as well. COVID says response plan refinement, you know, that's an ever evolving beast that is wonderful and very important, but also very challenging. Flexible working, venue in partnerships, and just the resilience. And also, I think one of the major positives is that digital is here to stay. I really couldn't say it better myself, so I'm going to defer to the Pattern Maker report, which was commissioned by the Australia Council and titled Audience Outlook Monitor, Australia Snapshot Report. And they've done it in 4 phases since COVID, and it is incredibly beneficial. It's a cross-sector collaborative survey process involving over 100 arts and culture organisations, including museums, galleries, performing arts organisations and festivals. And they speak about access and inclusion and the way engagement with the arts can be supported as, hold on, I have highlighted over here. Offering online content improves engagement with under-engaged or underrepresented audience segments, such as people living with a disability, young people, geographically dispersed people, or people with family and work commitments, etc. And I would suggest that some of our learnings are that online and hybrid experiences provide a means of tailored engagement. And in some cases, it can be more responsive. We have seen the emergence of public acceptance and appetite as well for lo-fi content too. And so we have this diversity of type that we can program. And it also means we can expand the types of partnerships we have and use our large organisations such as Arts Centre Melbourne as a means to amplify other voices.
Yeah.
Really schmick high-spec offerings as well as lo-fi content can be captured on the phone. Yeah. And I think the Pattern Makers report identifies that restrictions and the risk of lockdowns are affecting audience behaviour. it's no longer about contracting and transmitting the virus. Instead, it's more focused on the risk of lockdowns and cancelled events. And because of this, spending levels won't be as high as they were pre-pandemic.
Oh gosh, there's so many points I want to pick up from that. So I'm going to go back to one comment you made about licensing. And I think that's such an important thing. And I know even in events, I'm working with a keynote speaker on a Women in Leadership dinner. And we're looking at, it's a reduced capacity in the room. So we're looking to then extend to online. But to do that, then that changes our agreement. It comes into a licensing agreement if we make a recording. So, you know, even if you're starting to think, okay, I'll record it and then I'll just play it after, that adds another layer to a contract. So those sorts of things, you know, are things we need to be thinking about. The empathy and that everyone come in at this at a different stage, not only for your audience, but for your staff as well, I think is really important. And there's certainly groups I've been working with where, you know, I've been at one stage and they've been at another stage and someone else has been at another stage, and it's sort of how we work together, but then also read the play of our audience. And I was saying earlier before we came on screen that I went to one of the film festival sessions with someone who had been, you know, out and about, but that sort of, it was the first movie she'd been to, and that just, she kind of went, oh, I've got to walk out of the foyer, it's too busy. So understanding, you know, we may be March, April, but your event could still be the first of that type that the audience member has come to, and sort of what that means. And of course, with audience behaviours, it's also hard because we're running live events that then the setting is different to a private gathering. And I know I was talking to the conference director at Village Roadshow theme parks and you know, Movie World, those kind of things. And she said in Queensland it was hard, they obviously came out earlier, but they still had distancing guidelines in place. And people were sort of, but hang on, this is my wedding and these are all my family, so why can't I be, you know, sitting really close? And she said, but it's a different setting. So, you know, that's another challenge. People go into a restaurant and say, well, I'm sitting, you know, really, you know, we're packed in here, so why can't I do that there, or I can take off a mask here? It's that constant communication to build that trust, I guess, and set that scene. And then the collaboration. I think, you know, I love that talk of venue, you know, sort of the high spec collaborating with maybe, you know, different organizations. I know as event managers, I think we've never collaborated so much than we did during COVID. Sometimes we sort of saw other events or other event organizations as the competitor. So when in fact it's forced us to collaborate, and that's, you know, one of the great things that's come out of this, because we'll share our learnings, what did work, what didn't work, what we would do differently next time. But as you say, it's also allowed us to raise those voices that perhaps haven't been heard previously, and it is so accessible. Things can just be recorded on a phone and played at an event or captured. So I think that's been great. Cynthia, any major, you know, you tapped into the audience behaviours. What have you found with people coming to the live shows? Have you found any major sort of changes in behaviour that you didn't expect or that surprised you?
We definitely are aware, and we've talked about it in this session, that we have the responsibility to ensure that clear communication around ticketing and cancellation policies are really easy to understand and reiterated at various moments and referenced. And it's going to help audiences feel confident, particularly about ticket purchasing or booking tickets. But also that we need to maintain our digital offerings as a means to stay connected to our audiences in between or in lieu of live in-venue visitation. The Patternmaker report also talked about that COVID-safe guidelines are critical to confidence, particularly social distancing, particularly when there are individuals who are wanting to attend in venue and are able to attend in venue, but are living with a disability or have health concerns. Yeah, so I think it's around that, you know, in summarising and looking forward, we know that the audience behaviours is that strategic programming, both online, live and hybrid, COVID-safe considerations and thoughtful communication are kind of quite key to rebuilding audiences in the wake of COVID-19 and as we go into COVID normal.
Absolutely. And the Art Centre was so good at that. Certainly know I've chatted to Alana on one of these discussions around the communication you kept up during lockdown. A lot of venues we didn't hear from, but there was always something, and I think it was called While the Curtain's Down, or it was something like that that kept you engaged. And as you say, even if it's just communication between the live events or the hybrid, or, you know, sharing the scope of events that are now on offer, how important that is. And that goes back to, you know, our audience is the key or the heart of this. Thank you so much. I could chat all morning, but I am conscious of time. It's been great to have you join us. Thank you for those who have Zoomed in from home or your office. It's wonderful to have you as part of this conversation. I'm going to shortly post some links in here, but what I wanted to do before I go is just leave us with a quote from Charles Darwin, that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. And I think that's what we're all doing as event managers. So Troy and Jen, thank you. I know Jen's kindly gave us her time this morning, but gone to a meeting. So thank you so much. Johanna, Cynthia, it's been great to chat to you. To all of you at home, thank you for joining us. As I said, I'm just going to pop some links in the chat function. So if you want to find out more about the French Film Festival, the Art Centre, Live at the Bowl, or follow through Equestrian Victoria, you can find out some of the events. If you are in community sport and you want to know more, let us know. But thank you again. It's been great to spend this Friday morning with you. Wishing everyone a great, safe and healthy weekend. And we hope to see you at our next Reimagining in 2021. So that's a goodbye from here. Give the Zoom wave. And I look forward to connecting with you all again soon. Thank you so much. Bye.